and then we'll have Q&A. So, just to start, I was fortunate to be given the opportunity to lead the BIM Innovation Capability Programme for Ireland. This was funded by Enterprise Ireland. Actually, Enterprise Ireland deserve a lot of praise. They really have been the people who've been driving this agenda for the last number of years. You might have heard of their BIM Implement initiative, their BIM Enable initiative, and particularly through John Hunt in London, who obviously experienced a lot of BIM with the UK BIM mandate. They managed to gather some funding together to ask for a group of researchers, myself, Barry Macaulay, Roger West and Trinity, to look globally at what was happening and to look at other initiatives around the world to see if there was anything we could learn from them. And we looked at 22 countries. This document was published in the third quarter of 2017, and it really set the framework for what is the roadmap. Countries that particularly impressed us were the Canadian plan, the Singapore plan, obviously the UK plan, but particularly the Scottish plan. You might have heard of the Scottish programme and their BIM implementation programme 2015. So about mid-2017, we presented to the National BIM Council what we felt the vision for a roadmap would look like. And thankfully, they took much of what we suggested on board. Those of you who might have seen the roadmap or looked at the roadmap, it's not a level 2 roadmap. It's not asking particularly for particular mandates, although they are part of the plan. But really it's about the whole digital ecosystem that comes with BIM and how we can, start to routinely use standards in construction, but also to prepare our next generation for a new digital age. Ireland is very well positioned in this regard. IDA recently announced, it was recently announced last year, that's a Swedish group, IMD, they're very well respected globally, and they were really saying that Ireland was ranked first in many of these categories, in particularly the talented generation that's coming out of our educational system, our attitudes towards globalization, our productivity, and of course we have, I think, 6 of the largest FDI companies working in Ireland. So we're very well positioned. Those of you who might have seen the BIM in Ireland programme or document, that really set about telling a story about Ireland's journey with BIM and digitisation. So that again also had a bearing on the roadmap. We went and spoke to most of the higher educational authorities in Ireland. I know Galway was included in that. We gathered case studies, we interviewed government, and so on and so forth. So really that, again, was able to persuade the National BIM Council of the vision that we had for the future. So, look, it's been said again and again that construction is ripe for digitalisation. And I think that's really the essence of the message. Most industries that we know of have gone through a digital transition. All you have to think about is what Uber have done in the taxi industry, what Amazon have done in the retail industry, and so on. It's now time for construction. Those of you who've read the roadmap will have seen a very aspirational vision for what Ireland might look like in 2021. I, for one, perhaps think it's a little unrealistic. Last week, at the CIF conference, I know Kieran O'Connor, the state architect, felt that much of the vision in the roadmap was, in his view, was not achievable in a 4-year period. But I think a lot of it is possible. But if you just look at the left-hand side, that's an image from a very recent document issued by the World Economic Forum, which just shows BIM, bottom right, as only part of the total digital ecosystem. So we're talking about prefabrication, advanced materials, autonomous construction, and so on and so forth. So really, when you look at the roadmap, it's not just about producing digital design and using digital design for FM purposes. It's about the larger picture. So it talks about rapid planning. We have a planning system in Ireland that's quite traditional. It's It's quite bureaucratic. So the idea that you could get planning permissions within a matter of days, is that realistic? But the idea of open 3D single shared modules in a cloud platform is possible, and it is happening. The idea that design teams need to move from paper to data, and we need to move from the factory to the site. In many industries now, we've, for example, in the manufacturing industry, we have what's called dark factories, where there's actually no people working in these factories, and all we have is people at either end of the supply chain. Is that what's going to happen in construction? I'm not terribly sure. But certainly we need to leverage smart data for our urban environment. Now, in the BIM in Ireland report, again, this was reported to the National BIM Council, that we were mainly focusing on the tech side, and that we were just, there's some fantastic work going on in using BIM in the design of projects, but that we were less able in regard to collaboration and integration. And the one thing that really struck the government was how passive they were in regard to promoting digitization. Over the last number of years, we've been observing what's happening in the UK, what's happening in Scotland and around the world. And really, we weren't being, anyway, active or assertive. That's now changed. So now that we have the roadmap, we have a more responsive, a more active, a more assertive government. And also we can see that there was a big gap in that there was no policy. You might have heard, you know that the Office of Government Procurement have issued their statement of intent in regard to the use of BIM on public sector projects, and they've rolled out a 5-band structure which will start in 2017. So I think we've moved on in 2018 to a more assertive programme. Now, this word will probably be used a lot today, this word collaboration. There's some fantastic collaboration going on in construction. You wouldn't get things built unless we collaborated. But really, this collaboration is talking about industry, government, and academia engaging, working together, trying to deliver this roadmap. We haven't got any guidelines in Ireland for BIM, but I think so there needs to be the development of specific guidelines and protocols for Ireland. Now, I know that the Office of Government Procurement are busily putting together their tech team to start rolling out the guidelines for integrating BIM into their capital works management framework. There's a great example of collaboration in Galway between RPS and GMIT in the development of their higher dip in BIM. And we need to see really more of that going forward. Support. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. The idea that this roadmap needs to deliver real support for SMEs if we're going to make any progress in this space. We've also recently presented to the Council about the need for evaluating this roadmap. Somebody needs to monitor the roadmap. Someone needs to monitor the KPIs and report back that the KPIs are being achieved. And foremost in our minds is the need to keep this sustained and supported throughout the years, not just the 4 years of the roadmap, but into the future. Hot off the press is the World Economic Forum BIM adoption cycle. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but you can see that collaboration is absolutely critical going forward. They see motivation, collaboration, and enablement being the 3 key pillars. So if we just take collaboration for a second, they're talking about, in Irish context, the need to develop integrated contracts and to redefine risk-return mechanisms. We don't have that in Ireland. We don't have that yet. There's a body of work to be done there. Also, the need for early engagement, early collaboration, and the need for standards. You see, there's a separate pathway for standards. So much of this is relevant to us. The need for developing skills, there's an educational pathway. So when one looks at what the World Economic Forum are talking about, we're hitting all of those head on. Now, let's just talk about, this is about change. Effectively, this is about change. But as I see it, there's 2 pieces to be fixed here. Number 1 is the technical side of it. Somebody needs to manage this roadmap, manage this change. So we know where we are today. We're in a process now of changing, and we need to get to where we want to be, what the future looks like. So there will be a need for a technical project management team to develop the standards or adopt the standards internationally, and also to develop the learning framework that they're talking about in education. But above all, people need to change. That whole idea that changing the culture so it's a big, big thing to do. I think they say that something like 80% of change management programs in companies fail. And they fail, but many companies look, learn fast, move on. We only have one chance with this now. I've said it in recent weeks that some of these dates, some of these targets on this roadmap could be missed. The early targets, the quarter 2 2018 targets. So the industry is looking at this roadmap and thinking, yeah, okay, it's visionary, we've got a structure, we've got a plan. But we need to deliver this if we're going to really make the change that's needed. So, technical and people needs to move at the same time. I've also picked up this slide from actually a digital transformation program in the food industry. But we have the vision and we have the leadership team. Now that leadership team is currently being assembled, but what we don't have is a digital transformation team to deliver the roadmap. And that's something that we've been asking for over the last month or two from Enterprise Ireland and from the Irish government. Commission a team, commission a leader, drive forward. But also, if you have looked at the roadmap, you'll have seen a number of KPIs in there. The Government of Ireland will only invest in this if they see that it's going to be a benefit to their needs. So what has to happen with this roadmap is there needs to be some monitoring of the digital customer experience, i.e. the government's experience. Is it better to work with BIM as it is the way we do it today? So these three elements really need to be present. And this digital transformation team needs to have educators involved as well. So just a quick look at the roadmap. This is a roadmap that works with government, industry and academia. But there's two central lanes strided by leadership and by procurement. And that's the pathway of standards and education. We need to get companies using the language of PAS 1192 or ISO 19650, whatever that would be. So the more companies we see, the more third level institutes that teach their students about the importance of standards, international standards, then we'll see that change happening. We also need to educate our next generation to work more digitally in the future. So here's the roadmap, and you'll see that in quarter 1, what have we got left? 2 weeks? 2 weeks left. The National Educational Task Group needs to be formed. Now I know there's a meeting, some of you might be attending it next week in Dublin, but that's a meeting of the BIM Academic Forum of Ireland. Now what I'm hoping at that meeting is, when we sit down, we have a very purposeful meeting, and that we will then, the BIM Academic Forum will then write to the Council outlining their vision for how the educational pathway will be rolled out. I know John Hunt in London is working extremely hard as we speak to try and find the funding for this roadmap. And I also know that he's been consulting with people like the NSAI, the Higher Education Authority of Ireland and other organisations to get involved in the leadership platform. But as David O'Brien said, you know, the beast is now out, the roadmap is now out, and we need to deliver it. And that brings with it its own pressures. But interesting, in the top right hand corner, last week Kieran O'Connor, the state architect, didn't believe that we could reduce costs by 20%, that we could reduce delivery time by 20%. Maybe that's a discussion we can have later on. They're very ambitious. Are these possible? Who's going to monitor this? Who's going to report back? This is the reason for this roadmap, is to try and control the cost better for government. So let's just have a quick look at the 4 pillars. The first one, you recognise many of the logos there. Most of the organisations above the Office of Government Procurement are in place. In other words, the professional institutions have routinely got involved in the National BIM Council. People that are recently joined are the NSAI and also the Higher Education Authority and so on. So once these people are in place, then hopefully the leadership platform will be put in place. So the main recommendation here is the formation of a resourced National BIM Centre of Excellence. Wow, that's a fantastic vision. Where will that sit? I see this really as being an opportunity for outreach, for a centre, but to have outreach centres in the regions. The last one is interesting, that the need to continue to collaborate internationally with international groupings. So more about that, I would say, in the next month, once that leadership platform has been put in place. The standards one, I can see many familiar faces here that are involved in the CEN 442 Mirror Committee for BIM. So that's certainly up and running. We recently met with the NSAI. They're really keen to get involved, really keen to roll out certifying BIM in Ireland. Building Smart International, we're not directly involved with them, but there is a UKI chapter that we're working on. And the Irish Planning Institute and the Local Government Management Agency and Ordnance Survey Ireland have also recently joined that grouping. So, you know, I suppose we're all waiting for 19650, but we have many publicly available specifications that companies are routinely working on. I don't see a huge change there. I think any companies that are working with level 2 protocols, I think they'll find that it'll be a relatively seamless transition. So that really talks about Ireland committing to open standards. It talks about supporting companies who are adopting international standards. NSAI's role, I mean, we all know what the role that BSI, you know, BRE, and many other organisations who certify BIM, there's no reason why they can't still be part of that stakeholder conversation in regard to standards. The big ask in the roadmap is getting to a situation where planning, building control are all working seamlessly with the standards and harmonising data for the Irish government. But again, I know that David O'Brien in the OGP is very keen on the idea of agnostic technologies and standardisation and the need for the Irish government to specify them on projects. I suppose this is very relevant to where we are today, and I think, as I say, Galway, GMIT are leading the way in this regard. There is going to be a national educational task group set up. I'm hoping that GMIT will play its role there. It talks about launching a level 2 BIM assessment tool. Is there not already one in the market that we could use and adopt? Why do we have to reinvent the wheel? But the big thing here is getting agreement on an educational framework for digital education. Now, many of you might be aware that there is a group in the UK called BAF, and there's also a group in Scotland looking at the same thing. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We need to be talking to these people and moving forward. Another big challenge is getting all the institutes to agree on a common competency framework for BIM. That's a big ask. So will the architects, the engineers, surveyors all agree on this? It's a challenge. We have to meet that challenge. And also what's interesting is the roadmap also talks about working with the schools. I know, for example, in DIT, we work very closely with our local schools and our local career guidance teachers and so on and so forth. And I think there is this perception among school leavers that construction is, it's dirty, it's dangerous, whatever. And I think we could certainly use this digital opportunity to promote construction. I know Enterprise Ireland are busily looking to see whether they can have some involvement in the Young Sciences competition next year. So again, CitA are looking to try and start a conversation with the schools to see whether we could do some national competition with the schools, and again, that could be something done on a regional basis. But again, this idea of developing consistent, seamless, coherent digital experience for students in Irish education. I have to admit, in DIT, we have not been as proactive as we could be in some areas. We have a School of Multidisciplinary Technologies, but as a quantity surveyor, we've just started on the BIM journey. For example, in DIT, we've recently developed a first-year module for all of the professional courses in construction. And we now have first-year QSs working with first-year civil engineers, working with property surveyors, working with construction managers, and that's fantastic. But this is going to be a generational challenge going forward. Okay, procurement. Now this is one area that really we don't have much control of. This is the Irish government's responsibility. They have to create the environment within their contract framework to ask companies to work more collaboratively. So I know that the OGP are busily putting together their technical team, and they're busily working towards the target set out in their vision. But I think what you'll certainly see in the next number of years is the integration of BIM into the capital works management framework, and a clear ask for level 2 BIM on public sector projects. So some of you have seen this already, yeah? And you can see that in 2019, acute hospitals, laboratories, special civil engineering structures and so on will require BIM. And in 2020, third level institute facilities, high density apartment schemes. Again, it's all in the detail. Now, my own view is you can't just simply shoehorn this requirement into an existing contract framework. BIM doesn't work particularly well, in my view, with linear, traditional, architect-led projects. Where you're working on design and build operate procurement systems, BIM works better because the risk can be more clearly accounted. But again, these dates have been set out, so this is coming. If there's any incentive for companies to get involved in BIM, this must be it, because this is coming down the track very quickly. So that's just a more detailed view of the roadmap, and you'll see there particularly the reference to mandate B5 and B3, which are coming in 2019 and 2020. As I say, these are hard dates, and unless we hit these dates, the relevance of the roadmap will quickly dissipate. So, I do want to talk a little bit about SMEs. This is a statement from the roadmap talking about the fact that they're going to support SMEs going forward. Now, I looked at this, but actually over the last number of weeks, I've become more and more convinced that there are existing mechanisms that companies can avail of. For example, if you're an Enterprise Ireland client, many of you may have already got funding for the BIM Enable and the BIM Implement programs, whereby you can get a consultant to come into your company, and I know there's a cap on the cost, but they can give you advice on developing a strategy for digital construction. And also you can get, I think it's up to 70,000, is it, funding for training, also through their scheme. Now, I don't have any of the analytics to see how successful that program has been, but that's there at the moment, and companies should definitely look at it. Now, if you're not an Enterprise Ireland client, you should look at these innovation vouchers. We were so impressed a few weeks ago. We were down in Waterford, and the BIM Collective Group in Waterford, they've done over 160 vouchers in the last 3.5, 4 years. And this is where, a group of researchers or a group of lecturers work with local industry to develop their SME BIM proficiencies. It's fantastic. And we use them as also routinely in Dublin. Do you use it much in Galway? Ger, have you done many of these vouchers? The innovation vouchers?
We've done a few, yeah.
Okay. But they're pretty easy to redeem the vouchers, you know. And I think the message we got from Waterford was the more and more they do, the more formulaic they become and the easier they are to roll out. There is an issue with the VAT there, but, you know, SME companies should really use the mechanisms that are already there. Now, this was interesting. In the Building Ireland's Future 2040, there was a statement there that we kind of jumped on, and it talks about a new 500 million disruption technology fund that will drive collaboration between research, enterprise and education. That is perfect for this model. So there may well be an opportunity to tap into that resource to fund this roadmap, because I've said it before, the funding isn't there at present. I just want to talk a little bit about the regions. In order to prepare the ground for a potential proposition from Irish Construction for the delivery of the roadmap, I think we need to build the regions and make them stronger. If you see the reference there at the end of recommendation 1, it talks about a clear vision being set, communicated and fostered through a regional cluster of BIM communities of practice throughout Ireland. Actually, the one thing about what we've done, the one thing about Ireland is it's very agile. We're a nice size, you know, we can move fairly quickly, and we've seen right from, you know, right through our visits in Limerick, Waterford, Cork today, hopefully this afternoon and tomorrow in Athlone, a real thirst to get involved and a real thirst to come together, to share knowledge. So what we want to try and do with these regions is to really raise the awareness of the proposition that BIM can, the positive aspects that BIM can bring to business, promoting BIM adoption, you know, more regional events, and so on and so forth. And it's really through this that we can make the change. We've about 236 companies now in CitA. Now I know a lot of my colleagues in the board, like Ralph Montague, would say that we should have 2,000 members. It's difficult, isn't it? But I think the more and more companies we can get involved in the alliance, the greater the possibility is of actually building, you know, regional centres to address regional issues and regional problems. So please, Galway, it's great to be here, but we just want to see, we see really momentum there now going forward. Okay, so regional events. Now, you've heard of the UK BIM Alliance. They were the people really that approached, you know, CitA many years ago, the BIM hubs as they were called, and they've reformed themselves now, and they've merged with the UKI Building Smart Alliance, and they're doing exactly the same thing. They've 19 regions, 4 BIM communities, they've an academic forum, technology group, they've got lots of resources and lots of projects. The message is that we really need to work, and they're also transitioning, so the message is that Ireland needs to work, despite Brexit and all the other challenges, we need to work routinely with these groups. Now I'm going to finish on this slide here, and really I suppose what it does, it brings us back down to ground level in a reality check. You may have seen this in the roadmap. It talks about change. If we're going to get change, we have to have all these ingredients in place. Now, we certainly don't have vision, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan. You'd be surprised to hear that. We certainly have the vision, so the second one doesn't apply. But do we have the skills? Do we have the skills? I know as a QS, we're struggling with BIM. I think the profession is struggling with BIM. I think perhaps the architectural technologists and the contractors are getting on with it. But there's a lot that has to happen if we're going to have the skills. And actually, does government have the skills to work with this? Incentives. Are there enough incentives to motivate companies to get involved? Are there resources for this roadmap? Not yet. So we have frustration. and we don't have an action plan as yet. Now, the action plan will be put together, I understand, in Q2 once the leadership team are in place, and hopefully that will come with some funding as well. So I just wanted to finish off by announcing this event that CitA are running in Croke Park on the 8th and 9th of November, and it's a tech live event, so it's an opportunity for companies, for tech companies in particular, to give us an idea of where the technology is going. You understand, you may know that as well, that we're running a series, a digital transition series in Dublin. We have a meeting in a few weeks, actually about a month, is it? Yeah. And we have the Chief Information Officer from the Irish Government, and we have all of the professional institutes committing to the roadmap. So an awful lot's been done behind the scene, but if you can get to Dublin, that would be great. So I was in Croke Park last week at the CIF conference. It was great. This event is a little different. It's about getting the vendors to show us what the potential is going forward. So that's really it. And just to finish on a quote from the roadmap, we've lots of technology, but it's probably not very evenly distributed at the moment. So I hope that gives you an overview. I ran over a slide.